Welcome guys to today's video. We are actually taking a deep dive on steering angle, and we're doing it with this bone stock A90 Supra. If you guys aren't familiar with it, I am doing a build on the channel where this is going to be an automatic transmission controlled by the HTG GCU, where we'll be able to install a clutch pedal, be able to shift it like a manual, clutch kick it like a manual, handbrake with it like a manual, in hopes of making this a more driftable platform without all the crazy costs associated with attempting to manual swap it or buying a manual Supra. But with that, I want to develop a cheap and expensive angle solution. So where we're going to start, I have the car on turn plates, and we're going to see how much angle a stock Supra has. Now when I do this, mind you, because my turn plates only go to 30 degrees, obviously if it goes to 5 here, you add 30 to it, and then that means we have 35 degrees of angle. Typically with cars, you'll hear me refer to Ackerman. Ackerman has to do with the difference between the leading and trailing wheel. Most cars will have the leading wheel have more angle than the trailing wheel, which I assume is what we're about to see.
About 27 on this side.
Is it past 0? Then that would be 33.
It's not past 0. Then this one's about 37.
So we started out with 37 degrees on the leading wheel and 27 degrees on the trailing wheel. That's pretty normal, and that's going to equate to really good, happy steering feel. Now when you get into competitive drifting, those numbers will get closer together and you'll have a bit more parallel steer. Personally, I like having a bit more Ackerman and having that split between the leading and the trailing wheel because it makes the car feel very self-steery, happy, but it's not as fast because you're always scrubbing one wheel. Cars do this, I explained it in a previous video, because your trailing wheel, when you're trying to grip around a corner, has a wider diameter to go around a corner than the inside wheel that is following at the tighter radius. If you saw the previous video, I explained I cheated the lack of angle on the car by towing the front end out a bit. Now that makes the difference between the leading and the trailing wheel even worse, but I did a turn plate test on that and I can tell you it gave me 5 extra degrees, but the drivability, garbage. So we're gonna jump into angle solution number 1. I'm gonna interrupt you guys. Look, you knew it was coming. I told you that we were dropping a new giveaway along with all of the limited edition 10-year anniversary merch, but this giveaway is not only the best giveaway we've ever done, it's the first giveaway where every $5 you spend on not only LZMFG, but Drift HQ as well will get you entered for a chance to win one of these 3 cars. Now the reason that all 3 are here is because the giveaway car is a combination of 2. Now on the left, we have my Royal Sapphire Pearl Mark IV Supra. It's a SZR factory 6-speed NA car. Then we have my white beautiful Chaser with a 750 horsepower 2JZ, fully redone engine bay, literally one of my favorite cars to drive because of the power band. It's so snappy, it's the perfect amount of power for a street car. And knowing that we were going to be doing our 10-year anniversary collection, I wanted this giveaway to be off the charts. So I took my 2 favorite cars, my favorite looking, my favorite driving, and I'm combining them for what you see as the next official LZMFG and Drift HQ giveaway car. So this car is an SZR as well, so this is factory 6-speed, but this thing has some turbo parts on it. It's got turbo Supra brakes, it's Royal Sapphire Pearl, and this one already has the bay entirely resprayed and has a GTE motor in it. But if you look, it's nice, but it's not up to LZ spec. So we gotta put a nice billet plenum on it. We're gonna be copy and pasting what I've learned from the cam and turbo setup on that motor to this engine, and you can expect a very clean, very fun, very reliable, mid 700 horsepower Supra on ethanol. On pump gas, this setup probably will net you like mid 500, 600. Plenty of power to have fun, not too much to be a pain to drive. But the best thing is this car's absolutely beautiful and it could be yours. I've been teasing this stuff all over social media, but I want to give you a super quick look. We have one limited edition bundle, and that's going to come with 3 of our most iconic designs that have been remastered. 1 is the 240T, 2 is the High Hops Low Cars T, and 3 is the Send It T, which turned into Sent It because, well, we've been sending it for a while now. In that bundle, you'll also get this very special plaque. I've been signing them for a while. It looks beautiful. And 3 very special stickers, all part of the bundle. The bundle is going to go very quickly, so that you want to make sure you set a reminder Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we've also got restocks on the E36 gear, the shirt, the hoodie, a new E36 themed hat, and then we've also got some of the other designs on pieces that you can get if you missed the collection. We have a High Hops hoodie, we have the S13T printed on black, an S13 hoodie, 4-rotor Super restocks, and a brand new limited edition E36 deck These will probably go real fast as well, so if you want to get your hands on the bundle or the deck, make sure to set a reminder. I don't want to bore you. We also got 2 beautiful new hats that you might have seen me wearing in content. I think it's some of the best stuff we've ever made. I wanted to go big for this giveaway, and that's why we're doing a Mark IV Supra with one of my favorite engine packages on the planet. Every $5 you spend on LZMFG or Drift HQ is going to get you entered for a chance to win, and I'm stoked to build it. And one thing that I forgot to mention, another kind of reason or inspiration behind doing the Mark IV Supra is I wanted to be able to build 2 cars at the same time. So while we're building this giveaway car, we'll also be building my personal Mark IV Supra. The cars are going to share a lot of the same parts, but as you guys know, my car is going to be well over 1,000 horsepower, too much to be reliable and too much to give away to someone that may not have experience with a high power car. But it's gonna be a lot of fun building the cars together because I feel like the content will be less confusing than bouncing back and forth like we did with the R33 while we were building the 4-rotor. We'll just be focusing on Supra stuff for a bit, which I'm really excited for. I just got word as well that the winner of the R33 giveaway is going to be drawn tomorrow, so keep an eye on your phones, keep an eye on your email, because it could be you. As always, it takes a couple days to announce because we need to make sure the winner is confirmed, but I want to let you know before we get back into the content. Originally, I had told you guys my plan was to modify the knuckle on the Supra to get more angle, and I'll explain what that means. So on this knuckle, we have the center point right here, which is where the lower control arm would be, and this is our main pivot point. And then your tie rod hooks up to here, and when you turn your steering wheel, the tie rod pulls the wheel or pushes it in either direction to allow the car to turn. Now, my initial thought was to shorten the knuckle. On an S chassis, what you do is you would cut the knuckle, you would re-weld it closer. On a nice new car, people don't want to cut and weld stuff, so it was gonna make a bolt-on adapter. This, for purpose of illustration, this is an SLR adapter that you would use on like an E36. This is what we run on our competition car. I was going to make something like this that would essentially sandwich between the lower control arm and the tie rod pickup, and that would move the tie rod pickup inward. When it's closer to the point of pivot, the same amount of force on the steering wheel would wind up turning the knuckle more. But I was fortunate enough to have a rack out of another A90 Supra that when I started to dive into, there is an alternate plan that may allow us to get more angle out of the Supra without having to modify the knuckle at all. Now this is a bit foreign for me because this is an electric power steering rack. There's no fluid, it's all mechanical with a big fancy electric motor. And as you can see, this doesn't look like a normal rack either, it's like a screw. Now, you're usually limited with steering angle by your rack when the tie rod bottoms out and hits the inside. But out of curiosity, I wanted to pull it off because we have these things in drifting that are called tie rod spacers. And what you do is you basically slip them over the threads. You don't want to go too much because you want to leave enough thread to make sure that you still have proper engagement without damaging your rack. And it allows the tie rod to go in more. Because if you remember, we're bottomed out right now, and if you look inside, it's right where the threads become flush with the inside of the rack. But watch me turn this. This is my steering wheel, this vice grip. We have a whole entire another 90 degrees of turn on the steering wheel before the rack is mechanically limited. So when we put the spacer on, where before we were limited because it's flush, it allows us to get another small turn in, but it's not enough. There's still way more room on the table. I'll turn until this is bottomed out, and you'll see there's still quite a bit of room left. It's still just barely under the surface. When I can crank this thing, a whole lot more. That's gonna translate to many degrees of steering angle, but the problem is we only have so much thread. Now companies actually offer a solution for this. This is a GK Tech rack spacer, I believe for an S chassis, and this would thread on here and then would now give you a smaller piece that can go inside of the rack and allow you to have more steering travel. The problem is we have every single car under the sun at Drift HQ, but no one makes them for the thread pitch for the A90 Supra. So if my testing works, this could be a product that we could make, we could offer, and could potentially get you a lot more angle. The biggest variable that I don't know is how mad are the electronics going to get when we turn the steering rack past what it thinks its limit is. I don't know if it's gonna work. I don't know if it's gonna freak out, put the car in limp mode, but that's part of what our goal today is. And since I don't have the ability to machine one of these pieces, I'm gonna experiment with the lathe for the first time, and I'm actually going to turn down this part of the tie rod to get it to be a bit smaller so it can live inside of the rack. Seems sketchy, but believe it or not, there's actually a lot of companies that sell tie rods that are turned down to give you a little bit more rack spacing, and it'll be cool for me because it'll be my first time using the lathe. Now looking at this, there's two different lips. On the inside it's small, and on the inside I'm only going to use this to get past it. It leaves a tad bit of angle on the table, but what that's gonna do is it's gonna prevent us from completely bottoming out the rack, and it will stop here instead of stopping here. Now when I make my lathe piece, I'm only gonna have it so it can fit in this outside edge rather than going even farther inside this inside edge. That way we still do have some sort of mechanical stop on the rack instead of it going all the way in and then damaging things. So to fit inside that first lip, all I need is the diameter of a 24 mil socket. And if you look, that's really not milling that much off the tie rod, very little compared to the flat spot. And I'm only gonna need to go probably about until here. Anything past that, we'd also be getting into the danger zone with where the ball is. So again, this is experimental. The end all solution would be to create one of these, but I have a spare super tie rod and I wanna see what the rack's gonna do. Like I said, full disclaimer, I've never used this lathe before. We got it because it was the end of the year and we wanted to get a big tax break and we always wanted a lathe. We got one. Johan's used it quite a bit. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't even watched him use it, but I watched a YouTube video today on how to use a lathe and I feel confident enough to do the thing. So this is, again, I don't know lathe terminology, but this is the clampy john. I'm gonna clamp the tie rod end in the clampy john and hopefully it will be centered enough to do the thing. And then I'm gonna test spin it. I'm gonna test spin on low speed. Mike, watch all your fragiles.
Okay.
And I'm gonna use something to make sure, so it looks like I could clamp it a little bit straighter. That's what I'm trying to figure out right now, because if it's not clamped straight, it's gonna not give us the accurate cut. So because this is round, a little awkward, this is gonna be a little bit tricky. That's worse. All right, so it looks like it's in the machine pretty center. So I'm gonna stop that bit. I'm gonna start to eat off some material. I just gotta remember, don't wanna go too crazy right off rip because all we need is a socket's worth and it's gonna have a lot of weird little edges, so. Kinda makes me nervous. Is it not supposed to squeal?
No, it will squeal a little bit, but that's the bad squeal. So if it squeals that bad, that means you have too much.
So go a little bit like that first?
A lot less. Yup, right there.
Okay.
Yup, right there.
Okay. Damn, this takes longer than I thought.
Yeah.
I thought I was just gonna be like, eh. That looks pretty legit. I feel like there's been so many times where we've been in a bind because we needed a special spacer, or like, technically we could make our own like engine mounts with this if we just had like a solid brick of aluminum, which is pretty cool to think. We got the mill now, and we got a lathe, so we could be pretty self-sufficient. Biggest thing I gotta remember is not to touch that because it's probably like 7,000 degrees right now. But I'm really excited to see because like this should be it. I think we just made our own angle tie rod. When I said this is 7,000 degrees. Oh, interesting. The heat didn't transfer all the way to the other end. Wow, that's beautiful. And it doesn't look like it's interfered with strength. But part of the D, as we learned earlier, is the D. Or no, the most important part about R&D is the D. And when it comes to D, I'm your guy. I didn't do much R, but I'm definitely gonna do a lot of D. Nope, didn't say that. I'm definitely gonna, my focus is the D. Nope. My mission is to conquer
the D.
No. I'm gonna do testing, all right? That's what I'm trying to say. Now you might be thinking, wow, Adam's such an idiot. He machined off the flat spots that you need to tighten the tie rod in the first place. Two things. One, they actually didn't really work that well on this because they're so tiny. You had to use a pipe wrench anyway, which would just work on this. But we do have the mill where we could put this in a fixture and mill down like 4 flat spots when it does come to tightening it. But that's next phase. All right, so this is what our 2-stage situation looks like. This is where the rack used to stop. I'm gonna turn in our fancy new tie rod. Now let's see how much extra turnage we got. Boom. Not too bad.
That's like a whole 90.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, that's sick.
Now I'm gonna take this out and see how much more there is left to go. Because like I said, I didn't want to completely max the rack out because that could damage the rack internally. I still wanted to stop just before the rack's mechanical limitations. And let's see how much more we got left in it. A decent amount. But that comes down to this spacer guy here. If we had a little bit more there, that would solve that, but I don't feel comfortable with doing too much more. Now before I make the swap, just to show you, our limiting factor right now in the rear isn't really much. We can get plenty of angle, but on the front, we're gonna run into the knuckle hitting this arm, but I think we'll be able to get quite a bit of angle before that even happens, and we might even be able to clearance that a little bit. But first step, I'm gonna pull this tie rod out, pop the new one in, and see how much angle that gives us. First start. Now before I go and ruin both my tie rods on the car, I'm gonna use this one that I machined as a test dummy, and if it works and the car doesn't get too mad, then I can go and do it to both sides and see how it likes it. 3727 is what we had before. Let's see what we got now. I think the plate stopped turning. Yeah. Well, I didn't do much R, so now the D is going to take a lot longer. I noticed that before you'd get like basically one turn to lock. With the new tie rod adapter, you get like another 90 degrees, which matches what we saw on the rack. However, check this out. I'm going to bring it back to center, start the car. Now, it stops it sooner. The computer is actually, watch, I'll turn it off. Then there's all that I just added. I can't get, the computer is mechanically telling it to stop turning. And somehow that's a strong enough lock not to allow us to turn anymore.
Maybe there's just a fancy little fuse we can pull somewhere.
That's what I was gonna look. I was gonna look on the other rack and see if there's like a steering angle sensor, which there probably is.
Yeah.
Which is probably gonna throw a bunch of ABS codes, but maybe I can just pull a wire and then get my angle. So, one of these big plugs I assume is the motor.
I would assume the bigger one is the motor.
Yeah, and then maybe the smaller one is the steering angle sensor. I'll try unplugging and see what it does.
The computer is limiting the extra angle. You turn
Really?
the car off and it will give you the angle. You turn the car back on and it takes it away.
You watched the clip?
No, I saw him make it. Okay. We hammer it. Boom, boom, boom. These holes. All right. Out of joke. No jokes.
All jokes aside.
All jokes aside, there's a little suction cup inside the tank, inside this basket, that attaches to these holes. These holes must have come off with pressure, just like it did on the top side the first time. So on the top side, we saw that. We added a clamp so it didn't do that no more. It did it on the bottom side now, which it's crucial because this is where it sucks fuel from the tank into the basket. Without that, we don't have fuel pressure, at least for the one pump, the stock pump. The other pump is fine. So Sean and I tested that theory. We put in the tank back in the tank, power the pump. We got fuel now out of the main line. So now we'll have fuel pressure. Then Mike could go ahead, jump back on the computer and fine tune the engine. We don't think we're gonna make any more power due to the size of the intake or the intake length, but it's the process. We're gonna play with intake designs or run a length to be able to see how much power we can get out of the car. But for now, the car makes a good amount of torque. We did get the drive-by-wire motor from EFI Hardware. So in the next, once we're happy with the power, I think we're gonna go ahead and make the drive-by-wire system work like it was intended to. But for now, we're putting everything back in. We'll get the car back up and running, on the dyno for Mike to do his magic. And then once we are happy with how everything is functioning, I think he's planning to come down and do a little more fine tuning down here.
Well, I decided to abandon the rack spacer idea. It was a good idea, but alas, I'm not a computer wizard, but mechanically, I know I can make this car have more angle. Short knuckles it is. Now mind you, the proper way of doing this, if I was a real R&D guy, I would have a 3D scanner and I would scan this and then I could 3D print a piece that would fit perfectly. I could get my measurements from that 3D piece, and then I could put it into production and send it to someone at a CNC. I don't have a 3D printer yet, so what I'm basically doing is making a bunch of pieces of metal to make it fit, and then once I have that, I can then hand it over to Ginge, and Ginge can draw me up a 3D scan, and then I could manufacture a part. So right now, my start is figuring out the spacing of everything. This is my little shim that I milled, just because these aren't flat. So this will sit like this. The shim will slip in here, and then I'll have holes that will connect this, and then I can figure out where the tie rod's gonna be located. Now this, again, if I had time, I could order the proper tie rod ends. I was able to steal one from an FDF kit that has the right thread on one side, but the adapter is a little bit small on one side, so. It's weird how the feeling of a car returning from a long trip feels like you're getting a special present. The rig just showed up with the 4 cars from Vegas, my Evo, Colette's Evo, my GTR, and the piece of junk S13 that's never been in Florida. Well, I guess never been in Florida under my ownership. So I'm stoked to have them all here, and I'm really stoked to start doing some stuff with the GTR. I'm still gonna make a video with it for you guys, but that'll be coming soon. Very happy time turned into a nightmare scenario when I noticed that all the wheels were put inside the interiors of both the Evo and the GTR. As most of you guys know that have 90s cars, if you have clean interior, it's virtually irreplaceable, especially like the GTR is like unbelievably clean. Thank God the only damage was like a pressed in mark in the rear, like kind of like shoulder area if you're sitting in the rear seat, which looks like I might be able to get out with heat. I don't know how homie managed to get 6 wheels in both cars and not mess anything up. But thank God, or it would have been a very expensive mistake. That was not fun, taking a lot of photos, document. And like, I'm not like, you know, I have no problem putting stuff in cars, but those are the 2 cars you don't put in. Like, look at this. I don't even have a trunk and I still fit stuff back here. Mm-hmm. That's a diff in this box for my Evo. But that's a rear diff. I need a front diff because it's broke. What we have right here is V1 of the LZ knuckle. Now, I know it just looks like 3 holes, but I promise there's some logic to it. So we're looking down at my left front wheel. This is the center point where the lower control arm is. This is the original tie rod pickup point. So as you can see, with the same amount of travel from the rack, if the tie rod goes to here, if we move that tie rod down here, we'll get a little bit of extra angle. But you'll notice I offset this hole. I did that on purpose because if you remember, we had a very big split between the leading wheel and the trailing wheel. And by offsetting it farther towards the outside of the car on a front rack car, when we are the leading wheel, opposed to if the tie rod was centered, it's going to give us a little bit less angle. But if we are the trailing wheel, opposed to if it's centered, it's going to give us a little bit more angle. I know it seems really confusing, but typically on like an adjustable knuckle, you would have like a oval here, and then you could adjust the Ackerman to your liking to try to dial in your Ackerman or your split between your leading and trailing wheel. This is a guesstimate at first. It could be wildly off. Also, it's a guesstimate on my placement of the hole. And I wasn't able to MacGyver together a proper tie rod. So what we're going to be doing now is a little bit too much bump steer correction, because this will go in like this. I've got my fancy spacer. This will go in like this. Have a nut. But because I wasn't able to get a different outer tie rod, we're gonna have the tie rod sitting significantly lower. Now this wouldn't be a terrible thing, because when you lower a car, what happens is it rakes your tie rods up like this. So they still bump steer correction kits to bring them back down level. That way when you go over bumps, it isn't pulling your steering wheel in certain ways. This is a bit extreme, but given the time constraints that I have and the fact that I just like to order the right tie rod for the job, this should be enough for us to get some testing in to understand what the car does lock to lock, because the vertical placement of the tie rod won't play that much of a role other than when we're going over bumps. All right, we're about to have test fit for the very first prestigious LZ knuckle. You know what they say about me, it's not pretty, but it gets the job done. Of course I have a stupid bent thing that's gonna make my life miserable doing this, but One issue that I didn't totally think about was clearance with the sway bar with my super ghetto tie rod situation, so that might prove to be a small difficulty for this version. One small mistake that I already realized I made, and again, this would be very easy to do if I was CNCing like a piece out of billet aluminum, is this nut isn't flat with this. I used this triangular piece that at least fixed somewhat of like the mounting point for the plate, but the nut is still crooked because of what's up top. So that would be something I would need to account for, which would be easy if I was smarter and had all the fancy tools that fancy people have. But alas, we're gonna have angle. Good news and bad news. The good news, if you look at the wheel, we successfully gained a metric ton of angle. The bad news is, I was hoping to at least get some measurements. I wasn't gonna drive on it because I don't really trust my aluminum plate. When it was on the ground, because of the gnarly angle from the tie rod, because I used the stock tie rod end, plus the jacking, like you can see how off camber the wheel is right now. That's why on drift cars we usually run quite a bit of camber. It put so much load on the tie rod that when it went down on the ground, it literally buckled. You can see it's slightly bent there, and I hammered it up to try to get it flat. So unless I slide the upper camber in a bunch, I'll probably need to get stronger inner tie rods because there's just a lot of force to get it past the stock steering point. Definitely not something I was expecting. Yeah, there's the tie rod's also grinding the inside of the wheel. Like I said,
R&D.
yeah, the most important part of the R and the D is the D, and if you don't do the R, you're gonna spend a lot more time on the D. Unfortunately, my little tie rod adapter didn't work out, but now that means I have time to order the correct parts. I can put a little bit more R before the D, so hopefully my D will be easier, or hopefully my D phase will be easier. I really gotta stop with this analogy because it just never really works. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I wish that it worked, but the next video, we do have some great updates already regarding the automatic transmission control. Adam from HCG is already in town getting to work. We're gonna dive into that in the next video. See you guys soon. Part of the D, as we learned earlier, is the D. Or no, the most important part about R&D is the D. And when it comes to D, I'm your guy. I didn't do much R, but I'm definitely gonna do a lot of D. Nope, didn't say that.